I'm talking about what happened in the wake of long-range Western weapons being used in the special military operations zone. As a result of the escalation, the United States and their NATO allies said that they give their permission to use long-range weapons against targets inside Russia. Experts know fully well, and the Russian side has underscored this time and again, that using such weapons without the direct involvement of military operators from manufacturing countries is impossible.
That was Vladimir Putin just, I think, barely 2 hours ago, maybe less than that, as he's addressing his nation on the escalating situation between Russia and the United States, Great Britain, and in fact, the Western world. Now, all of this is coming as the latest moves up the rungs of escalation ladder by the United States when Joe Biden, first of all, just toward the end of last week, I think, gave the authorization for Ukraine to use long-range weapons deep inside of Russia. And then just a few days later, the first strike actually occurred. Long-range weapons were sent. Now we've had at least 3 separate reports, 2 of U.S. ATACMS missiles, 1 of British Storm Shadow missiles that have been launched into Russia. As of this moment, we still don't have any information about battle damage assessment from the U.S. and U.K. launches, other than that they happened. The Russian side themselves claimed that all the missiles were shot down, and 1 missile was allegedly deflected, but still caused some damage on the ground when it impacted. That's what we know so far. Then we had this morning the first response from the Russian side, and that was what was initially reported as an intercontinental ballistic missile that was launched from Russia for the first time ever onto the ground in Ukraine, first time ever in warfare. Well, it turns out to have been an intermediate range ballistic missile. Not a whole lot of difference other than the range that is going on there. This you can see some of the video footage from these warheads, which it's a single rocket in most cases, but they can break up into multiple warheads that independently hit targets on the ground. And apparently that's what we're seeing right here. Really dramatic footage of these things impacting here. These were conventional warheads, but the missile can carry a nuclear warhead as well. Very, very important. And we had John Mearsheimer on earlier this afternoon, actually, before Putin had made those comments. And he said almost certainly that was a message that we have fired this intercontinental ballistic missile, this intermediate range ballistic missile here on a conventional warhead, but it can be sent elsewhere as a warning to the West. That was what Professor Mearsheimer speculated the information was. Well, now we have not just a speculation, but we have Putin himself directly addressing this situation. And you heard in that first clip we had at the opening there, where he's saying that these actions are, in fact, a direct response to the long-range weapons that were allowed to be used by the West. And he says, hey, these things we know can't be operated by Ukraine without. It's not like an Abrams tank or a Challenger tank or something like that can be, the crew can be taught and they can be autonomous and, there's no external help. This one cannot be fired unless the West allows it to be done, unless the West directly participates. It's far too complex of a system to operate, to target, to maintain, to get onto the target itself. So that's certainly a true statement. There's definitely no problem with that. There shouldn't be. It's self-evidently true. And that truth was driven home also, and I think about 1 hour ago, by the Russian ambassador to the Ukraine, who went on the British media to address what is going on. And this is not a mistake. I'm sure this is very well coordinated in Moscow, but watch this exchange between the British questioner and the ambassador.
So are you saying now that Britain is directly involved in this war?
Absolutely. Britain and UK is now directly involved in this war because this fighting cannot happen without without NATO staff.
Now, when the U.S. was asked about this, just I think about 2 days ago, maybe it was 3 days ago, Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, was being asked in an American interview What about this claim? Because Russia's been making it for a while that if you use long-range weapons, we know that it's direct participation in this. And watch his response.
The Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, today has responded saying that, yes, there is no official confirmation, and if there were, it would mean that there was direct involvement of the United States in the war.
If the U.S. were to authorize the use of any weapon system, including this weapon system, it wouldn't mean direct U.S. participation in the war. It would mean a continuation of the policy we've had since the war began, which is that we supply the means to Ukraine to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and they fight the war.
Okay, what you're seeing there is the continuation of what we've been doing throughout. Doublespeak and just flat out lying in many cases. But look, does Jake Sullivan, who is his audience here? Does he think that we're all stupid? Because obviously the Russians aren't stupid. And most other people aren't either. Anyone who knows anything about how these systems operate and how the things that we're doing understands the ramifications and the truth. And for the national security advisors to go out there in front of the world and say, oh, this is just like, it might as well be a shoulder-fired missile or an artillery piece. We give it to them and they do whatever they do with it. But our hands are clean. Look, that doesn't work in reality. And that's one of the big problems with what we're doing here. We keep going on with this kind of detached from reality, playing like high school games, or maybe that's an insult to high school students. It's probably something more like elementary school games, to where we just say what we want to be true. And then even though it's nakedly obvious in public what the reality is, somehow we still make the claim. Like maybe a little kid who's hiding underneath the curtain there and saying, no one will see me here. Everyone can see you there. I mean, it's cute if it's a little child, but if it's the national security advisor of the United States, it's talking about the potential for escalating war. It's not so cute. And that's the situation we're in. We keep having a lot of that things. And then, you've seen, if you've watched our show for any amount of time, you see they have a lot of everywhere from President Biden, National Security Advisor, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Sabrina Singh, Matt Miller, all these folks, they keep saying things that are self-evidently untrue. And it's just trying to project a message that we want to be true, but that it isn't. And oblivious to any potential consequences. And that's one of the things that we're starting to get into the problem here. We have always assumed that we can do whatever we want and there will never be a consequence. That we can continue to help Ukraine fight a war against Russia, killing Russians on a daily basis, and that there will never be any problem. That we'll never have any kind of a pushback. And you see, even from Biden, he wasn't really sure whether it would or not. You may recall that he made this big claim at the early part that, well, we're not going to get involved in, if you have F-16s and Abrams tanks and all kinds of other things, well, that's World War III. So we don't want to do that. That was a good idea back then. But then we gave, all right, well, we won't man them, but we'll give the Abrams tanks, the Patriot air defense systems, the HIMARS long-range or short-range rocket systems, maybe the ATACMS, but not all the way. Oh, maybe the F-16s, but just not that many of them. And nothing ever happened. It's so perverse. I would say ironic, but it's perverse that they don't stop to think. We gave them all those weapon systems, and it didn't change the course of the war. Now, you've had Jack Keane repeatedly complain that, well, these things should have been given early. We showed you earlier this week, I think John Bolton said the same thing. Yeah, we gave them all this stuff, but it took a long time to get. Okay, so the hell what? If those things would have made the difference that they said, and we'll just pick one example. Let's say that the M1 Abrams, instead of the day that they showed up, let's say that they had been given 6 months earlier. Would it have changed anything on the ground, the way those things perform? Whether those tanks show up on, say, January the 1st or on July the 1st, is it going to change how they perform on the ground? Self-evidently, the answer is no. And just saying, well, if they had come earlier, it would have made a difference, because there's no because. Because the things will have the effect. If it would have had an effect on January 1st, then it would have still had an effect on July the 1st. And you can make that argument with every single thing. Yes, there was lots of dithering, without question. It was a terrible thing. I don't disagree with them on those. But the fact is, when they hit the ground, they didn't make any difference. You remember the big $61 billion package that was initially, they tried to pass in September of 2023 and didn't end up getting until about 6 months later in 2024. And they said, oh, well, that delay really caused a lot of problems. Okay, but then it finally came, and zero impact, folks. And I mean zero. So had it passed on schedule without any question on September or October the 1st, or instead of it was 6 months later, it's not going to have made any difference. It hasn't made any difference then. See, it's not like a deal like, well, if you get a package of milk and it's past its expiration date, now it's no longer good. That's not the way it is in warfare. If you get an Abrams tanks or billions of dollars and you put it on the ground, it's going to function how it's going to function. It doesn't know about dates. It doesn't care when it came there or when it was supposed to come there. It only cares what it does on the ground. If they had been correct, if John Bolton had been correct, if Jack Keane were right, then when those things finally did hit, then you would have seen a big change on the battlefield. And you never did, because those claims were never true. They're always untrue, because as I keep saying, reiterating from the beginning, war is about men, not about machines, not about money. It's about the manpower. And the manpower for the Ukraine side has been gutted. It has been eviscerated. And now then they're literally just throwing guys off the streets and throwing them in uniforms. And that's not how war works. That's not how armies work. But we keep being disconnected from reality and clinging to this fiction and clinging to this belief that we can keep doing whatever we want and there will never be a consequence. Well, folks, listen. No one has wanted to listen to the claims of Vladimir Putin. We keep saying that he's bluffing, and we crossed red lines in the past and they never did anything, ergo they never will. Well, that's not true, first of all. Some of those red lines we impose on ourselves, not them. But let's look at the ones that they did designate. They did designate in, I think it was December of 2021, and definitely by February or January of 2021, they did say if NATO continues to go into Ukraine, we will use military technical means to prevent it. We will stop that from happening. And then in February, they did exactly what they said. Now then, the Russians have said, if you break this red line and you use long-range missiles, we're going to take action. And now then, here comes a medium-range ballistic missile, an IRBM, and has now struck in Ukraine. And as you're going to see in a minute, Putin talks about what that's going to mean. But that is a tangible action that has happened. And now I want to take a look at some of the other things that he said, because we need to be paying attention to the things that follow here, because otherwise other actions could follow. Here's what Putin said when he's talking about, we keep talking about how all this is Russia's fault, but he says not quite so.
It is not Russia, but the United States who have destroyed the system of international security. And they are trying to preserve their hegemony and stoking a global conflict. We have always preferred, and we still prefer, to resolve our disagreements using peaceful means, but we are prepared for any scenario. And if anyone has any doubts, they shouldn't. There will always be a response.
Okay, folks, read the room. Look at the body language of Putin. Look at the determination in his face, and look at the actions he has taken. And I'm just using those two examples, and they're big ones. In prior to his invasion in February 2022, he very clearly said, military technical means, we'll do it. And he did it here. Now he's telling you, if you keep going down this path, or he did say, correction, past tense, if you use long-range weapon systems, we will respond. Now he has. And this is a shot across the bow. And he now told you there will be actions if there are continued responses at this point. We may have already gotten lucky so far because, as I said, these ATACMS and the Storm Shadow missiles didn't actually hit anything or didn't cause any significant damage, though Putin did say earlier that some strike of some sort did strike home in the Kursk area and did kill some Russians. So I think that may be the impetus for why he was so serious and talking about, if this continues on, there will be reaction. Do not think this is a bluff. It would be irresponsible to the highest degree to think, well, maybe he doesn't mean it this time. even though he has in profoundly these other times. Listen, this weapon system he uses, this is not something to be trifled with. This is something that is really, really important. And he goes on to say that, well, in fact, let's see what he says, because he talks about what we can and can't do with this weapon system.
There is no way to counteract a missile that flies at 10 Mach, which is 2.5 to 3 kilometers per second. Existing anti-missile systems and the anti-missile systems deployed by the United States and Europe cannot intercept such missiles. It is impossible.
And he's right. And that's always been the case for a lot of these higher range or higher echelon weapon systems, the ICBMs and some of the IRBMs. They travel so fast. He talked about there at Mach 10. That we don't have anything that can intercept that, not with any reliability. I mean, we have some with our THAAD system can intercept some missiles, but it's very uncertain, especially ones that are flying this fast. And when they have, as this one apparently did, multiple warheads that did deploy off of that. I mean, you don't have that many interceptor missiles, even if they're all 100% effective, and it may not be any of them effective at this case. And you saw that video that Gary showed earlier. You see all these warheads that keep hitting the ground there. Nothing could have stopped those, and nothing did. And he's telling you very clearly what we already know. Now, see, the thing is that some people can say, oh, well, the THAAD would knock it down, whatever. Number one, there were only 7 of those things in the world that we have, and we just gave 2 of them to Israel. And so they're not in very many places. So even if they happen to be actually really effective, and they're not that effective against, and they may not be effective at all against this particular weapon system. It's ironic because earlier today we showed you that Zelensky was accusing Russia of experimenting on the ground in Ukraine, which was kind of a bizarre thing to claim. Even more strange when Putin, in the same interview, confirmed that that's exactly what it did. This was an experiment of a new weapon system and a new capability, and he validated that it worked on the battlefield. This weapon system, this missile, had conventional warheads, non-nuclear warheads. It is possible that the next one carries nuclear warheads. That's what it's made for. That's one of the big dangers of these. And he is emphatically telling you, don't think your new weapon system, even if you had 50 THAAD systems and air defense systems, and they were all of it, it's not going to be enough because we can penetrate that. So he's telling you, if this thing escalates further, if you go another rung up that escalation ladder and take more provocative action that strikes at targets in Russia and kills Russians, that they are willing to strike outside of that. And as a matter of fact, he went on to say that this next part here, if that wasn't chilling enough, that's kind of implied. Now he gets a little bit more specific at what may be targeted.
The further course of action will be determined based on the threats to the security of the Russian Federation. We believe that we have the right to use our weapons against military facilities of countries who allow their weapons to be used against ours. And in case of an escalation, we will act as decisively in a mirror fashion.
So he's telling you there, if you act in one way, we will act in another. In another section of that speech there, he specifically said, we will attack anyone who continues to do this. We will reserve the right to attack even in that country. Now, that's where you get all this issue about, are we on the brink of World War III? Because this one right here was an attack inside of Ukraine. They can attack. There's a number of NATO places and a number of NATO people that are still helping. We know this. This is open source, not even secret information, that they can attack NATO forces inside of Ukraine. So they can take it there, but they reserve the right, so he said, to attack NATO forces that were responsible anywhere they are. Now, if he takes that action there, if let's just say that we ignore this one too, and that we don't think that it's serious, and the next time we actually strike something that hits them hard, and like a missile depot is attacked or something, or a command and control center somewhere, and a lot of Russians are killed, and it's a painful strike. Now, as I've told you, we don't even have enough missiles to actually have an operational or even a tactical input. It's not going to do anything to the front line. That has been admitted by nearly all these experts. They just say they want more, ignorant of the fact that we don't have more. And as John Mearsheimer pointed out again earlier today on our show, I recommend you go watch that. It's a fabulous one. He said there had been somewhere around 6,000 missiles fired from the Russian side throughout the depth of the Ukrainian force, and that has not made them collapse. That has not ended the war against them, and they still are able to hold, and still able to offer defense and make it hard for the Russians on the front lines. It definitely degrades their ability, but it only degrades it. It hasn't stopped it. And now then, we don't have 6,000 missiles to give Ukraine. So there is no chance that you're going to have any even tactical impact on this war so far. So why then are we continuing to risk potential escalation that could go nuclear? And now Putin is making it clear that he is dead serious about this. He's given you warnings and he's given actions to show that he means this. Now, if he does, though, if that strike that a hypothetical strike does take place and Russians are hurt and killed and it's a painful strike, even though it's not going to change the course of the war, but if it's painful enough, he may say, that's it. That's the end of it. I gave you a warning. And then he may strike. I would wager almost certainly with another conventional strike to, say, a weapons depot of the U.S. in Poland. That was actually talked about earlier today. Some of the Russians pointedly said this new missile base that the NATO built in Poland, very close to Russia, is a legitimate potential target in the event of hostilities. It could be something in Romania. There's lots of NATO depots and whatnot that have been using to shuttle information and weapons and ammunition from the alliance into Ukraine, or perhaps even into the German situation. There's a lot of American facilities in Germany, airfields, Ramstein Air Base, big one there. Those could come under attack as well. And of course, if any of those are hit, you know what happens next. Article 5. And there's going to be a lot of people that stand up and say, okay, it is time to, ramp this up. And as Jack Keane ridiculously said on a clip we showed earlier today, you know what the Biden should have done? They should have blasted Russia before. Well, that is so ignorant and just ridiculous to say. And just oblivious to the potential for consequences. Can you imagine if Biden had done that before, or if he does it here and, quote, blast Russia? Folks, that means a major war. And when Sabrina Singh was asked this, the assistant spokesperson for the Pentagon was asked at a press conference with some very legitimate questions here about, not just this situation here, but also with the expanding military cooperation between Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China. Here's how it went.
Given the joint U.S. and NATO escalation of attacks with Ukraine against Russia, and with China and North Korea joining Russia to form an alliance against the West, would not you say that World War III has begun?
I would not say that. That is not the characterization that this building assesses. And you've seen us take measures to de-escalate tensions and to, and I'm sorry, I'm just speaking like broadly around the world, but when it comes to Ukraine, the commitment of this administration from the very beginning of this war was to help Ukraine take back its sovereign territory. A decision by another country to invade its sovereign neighbor cannot go unchecked. And that's why you've seen not just the United States, but 50 or so countries all around the world come together and support Ukraine through the Ukraine Defense Contact Group.
I as I'm watching that clip there and waiting for it to be over, I see one of the comments here that I want to put up on the screen. It says, do these psychos in the U.S. think this is a damn video game? You know what? I mean, maybe they do. That's part of what I'm talking about, this disconnection from reality. It's not a video game, but they're acting like it is. Like if the role they're playing, if it gets fit, they'll just hit the button and reset and just go on. This is real life, folks. There is no reset button. If you get killed here, you're dead. If a bomb lands somewhere, it blows up and destroys whatever it hits. And God, listen to me, folks. This is not 1991 anymore. When the Soviet Union collapsed, China was still a third world country, basically. They had a peasant army, nothing modern about anything. Their ability to project any power at all was weak. Their ability to defend their own shores was very limited. And there's nobody else on the landscape. Iran was a midland power at most, and North Korea posed a threat to South Korea, and that's about it. Now then, it's a radically different world. North Korea now has nuclear weapons. They're getting stronger all the time. Now then, they have a military alliance with Russia. They're providing ammunition and weapons at large scale, much bigger than the entire West is able to do for Ukraine. They do for Russia. And then you can add Iran into that equation as well. China wants to, despite how they're characterized ordinarily, they want to avoid all the war. They've even called out Russia a little bit after Putin changed his nuclear doctrine publicly. They actually publicly said, hey, let's just cool the jets here. So they're not trying to stoke anything at all. And for those who think that China would benefit if there's a war, you don't understand how the international system works, how the international economy works, the energy systems, all those things are interrelated. They don't want a war. Russia doesn't want a war either. They're trying to test it. Iran doesn't want a war. North Korea doesn't want a war. They just don't want to be attacked. They don't want to be in a world to where the U.S. is constantly threatening or actually enabling, like they are with these long-range weapon systems now, the attacks into these countries. Don't you understand, leaders of these of the West, of NATO, United States, UK, other countries, France? The actions we're taking is not making us safer. It is not making us look good. It is not making the other side cow and back down. It is giving them every reason in the world to get stronger, every reason in the world to work together to our harm. Everything that we're doing has having the opposite effect on what they are, these warmongers that run a lot of our national media and have been in government for a long time. All these claims that they make and all these arrogant statements have an opposite reaction. Our security is now weaker than it's been at any time in my lifetime. The threat of war now is way higher. I was first in the U.S. 2nd Cavalry Squadron Regiment, 2nd Squadron, 2nd Armored Cav Regiment in Germany during the Cold War time. I was actually a private in 1985 in an MLRS battery, actually, even before that. Part of the Cold War, and we were constantly on exercises against the possibility of the Soviets come rolling across. And look, that was all really serious back then. But there was by the time I got in 1985, there was kind of a stasis there. It already existed where there was things that were kind of in a balance. You had the two sides, both recognized the catastrophic results if they ever went to war. So there wasn't a whole lot of chance of it, and everybody kept doing their exercises on either side of the Iron Curtain. And there was general relative stability in the world. Now then, after we won the Cold War, that stability is now gone because the balance that had existed went away. Problem is, instead of saying, hey, let's establish a new equilibrium to where everybody else gets a chance to prosper, we said, you know, what a great idea. No one else is strong enough to do it. Let's just push down the Russia even further because, hey, look, you've got to be honest. You need an enemy if you're going to have a military alliance. And after the Warsaw Pact disintegrated, and most of them ended up coming to the West, and Russia was, especially beginning, was a shell of the former Soviet Union for decades afterwards. There was no need for a military alliance. But we not only kept it, we expanded it. And then when Russia was saying, don't do this, it was going to be bad. Well, they were powerless to do anything about it. We ignored it. We continued through. We didn't care anything about it because they couldn't do anything about it. This isn't the 1990s anymore. Now Russia very much can do something about it. While we said this whole time that we want to weaken Russia and we kept this war going and we would not take any of the diplomatic off ramps that were possible, now then with the results we have, there are consequences whether we accept them or not. Russia is now stronger than it was before. It is more resilient economically. It is much less subject to sanctions or any other kind of pressure we can bring. And their military specifically is conventionally stronger than anything in Europe right now. And that includes, I'm sorry to say, the United States Army. We are no longer the preeminent ground force. They are. And God help us all if that ever gets put to the test. Now, the wise thing to do for the incoming Trump administration is to do what Trump has said he's going to do, And that's get this off the table quickly. Just pray to God that we can actually get to January 20th without this erupting into a war. And if we do, get this war over with immediately. And then you need to go about restructuring the United States armed forces, especially the ground forces and the land warfare, the doctrine, system, the organization, the whole deal, to bring us back up and so that we can actually potentially compete in the event that we do have to fight Russia. Because right now we can't. We're still arranged for basically Desert Storm. We're not hardly any different than we were Desert Storm, which is not a lot different than we were at the end of World War II in terms of organization and doctrine, et cetera. And I'm telling you, anyone who's been paying attention to this war here sees that wars are now dramatically different than they were and have to be fought a whole lot different because of missiles, drone warfare, electronic warfare, et cetera. And we haven't made this shift. We've made incremental changes in our army. They have made seismic changes, and it's constantly being refined because they discover it through blood and pain, how it works. Well, they're learning, and now then they're demonstrating that. Everything in the world says that we need to end this war. We need to stop being stupid. We need to get the arrogance and just put it in the pocket and just suck it up. And that this is no longer 1990. It's now well into the 21st century, and things are going badly for us. The trends are going in ways that are bad for the United States. And we need to put the brakes on this before it goes too far. It hasn't gone too far yet. There is still time to do this, but we need the Biden administration, while they're still in power for another 2 months or so, to stop being dumb, to stop provoking these ridiculous and completely unnecessary provocations. You're not going to change the outcome of the war. You're not going to make Russia any weaker. You can't help Ukraine win. So don't do things that have the possibility of expanding the war and actually bringing it into NATO to where an Article 5 is even talked about. The only way an Article 5 is going to be talked about is if we take another stupid action that escalates another rung up the escalation ladder. Russia's not going to do it. If they were, they would have done it today. Instead of firing this intermediate range ballistic missile IRBM into Ukraine, they would have fired one into the NATO area already. And then they would have given that. That probably was discussed as a possibility, but they didn't do it because they don't want war. Take the win. Take that lucky thing there. Or you could even say take the loss if you want, because that will show that they have the upper hand here, and they do. Don't let the arrogance come in and say, no, they really don't, because I'm strong. Look, see, I got an American flag on my shoulder, so I'm impervious. Dude, this is a piece of cloth here, I assure you. Stands for a lot of things, but it won't stop a bullet. It won't stop a bomb. It won't stop an intermediate range ballistic missile. It won't help you anything if one of them is nuclear tipped. And we are playing with fire. We are playing into the hands of those who want war if we keep doing things that are stupid. We need to say, all right, that's fine. We got up to the brink. Cool the jets here. Let's just have a nice transition in the next 2 months. And it's still, as I've been telling you a lot, even if they do that, it's still going to be really difficult for President Trump to come in and actually make a deal that's anything good for Ukraine or the West, because Putin has all the strong cards. You can be a great negotiator, but you got to have something to work with. And right now, Putin has all of the cards that are best for negotiation, because if he doesn't like a deal, he can just keep going militarily on the ground in Ukraine and capture whatever he wants if he doesn't get it in negotiation. So it's going to be tough. But listen, that is nothing compared to taking more foolish actions that can't help and could spread the war. It is time to stop being stupid. That's your deep dive for today. Listen, I appreciate you guys watching. Please share this. I don't say this too often, but I'm sure saying it now because the stakes are rising here. People need to understand the truth. Too many people watch the mainstream media and they don't get this. They don't get this kind of understanding of how everything works together, or of the history that led up to this, or of the capabilities that could go forward. Share this with people you know. Make sure people are aware of this, and that make your voice heard by whatever means you can. That we don't want any war. Everybody, just the most normal people in the world, just want to get along, just want to be able to live their own lives and do business with everybody. I mean, I think what normal person wants war? Well, there's some people who don't seem to qualify under that category in government. We'll have to see how that works out. But that's what we ought to do. So appreciate you guys watching, and I'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.